Thank you very much. I'd perhaps like to offer a bit of anti-venom to deal with the member for Solomon's very snaky comments. And I think we can be pretty mature here and recognise that that representatives of all sides, all parties in this place are very, very enthusiastic about the agenda to advance the position of Aboriginal people in this country and to address the endemic problems that we have seen emerge over the last few decades in Aboriginal education and the role that they play in really that Indigenous difficulty in education really has been undermining Aboriginal people being able to take their rightful place in our economy and our society. I think we've got to get a little bit beyond this sort of absurdity of pretending that only one party is interested, and indeed we would very much like to be recognised as being great promoters of this. Now, the difficulty is that these issues in relation to Aboriginal education and the advancement of Aboriginal people are very complex, and there has been established over many years that there have been no easy answers here, and it is very much a case of black and white Australians having to work together to explore all of the opportunities. And Labor took its commitments under closing the gap very seriously, and I think we can demonstrate that there had been some achievements, but no one would ever argue that anyone has taken the view that we have resolved all of the problems, and this is going to be something that will require many decades of dedication to dealing with. Now, my colleagues have outlined many of the shortcomings of the legislation, but like a number of members, I really want to focus on the Indigenous education aspects of this, and in particular the Indigenous boarding initiative. And I have a very my engagement in Aboriginal education has gone on for some time, but at the moment I chair a group called the Mātu Education Advisory Group. The Mātu are a group of Aboriginal people in the who occupy parts of the Western Desert and Eastern Pilbara regions, and I have they have asked me to become involved in helping them progress their educational agenda, and that has been a great honour to be able to be involved in that. And the chairman of the Woodlack Board, the native title group for the Mātu, Brian Sampson, says that he and his community really understand that they were left behind in the mining boom because they did not have the education. Their people did not have the education to seize that opportunity. And indeed, it is. We had a recent meeting a month or so ago on a Saturday up in Telfer to work out how we were going to take the education agenda forward. And one of the very disappointing things, we're right in the heart of Telfer, has now become regrouped now as a company town. The gold mining company employs some 1,000 people, and we'd be lucky if about 20 or 30 of those people were indeed Aboriginal people or Mātu people, whilst there are hundreds of Mātu people that would benefit from those employment opportunities. So quite clearly, here we have a real disconnect. Here we have an area where there is indeed big employment, a big employer, and the ability for the Aboriginal community to access that employment is very limited. And part of the problem, not exclusively the problem, but part of that problem is the ability of Aboriginal people to access education and really be in a position where they can be competitive for this employment. Now, I'm very pleased to say that the community has been very interested in the direct instruction, explicit instruction model that we have seen working pretty well in Cape York. There is a view that certainly attendance at the school and the achievement of the schools, despite the best endeavours of a great many dedicated teachers, has really not been good, and that we can't keep doing more of the same. So the community has gone to have had a considerable interaction with the work on Cape York Peninsula. Indeed, a group of them came to visit Cape York, the 4 schools on the Cape York Peninsula, and came away very much convinced that this was the path that had to be tried, that we had to get a more intensive, explicit instructional method that would be more suited to the needs of the Mardoo students, and at the same time recognising that there had to be an enhanced commitment from the teachers, from the parents, to ensure that their children attended school, because no matter how good your methodology are, if children aren't at school, that methodology is not going to assist them. So it's got to be something that works together. But indeed, one of the problems in my experience of working with quite a number of schools in disadvantaged years over my 20 years of public life is that when children fail at school, they don't want to go to school. So indeed, the instructional method and failures in the instructional method feed into absenteeism. Because no one wants to go to a place where they feel that they are dumb, that they are unable to keep up with the work that's been presented. Indeed, they're getting nothing out of it. So these are complex issues, but I'm very pleased to say that the Mardoo now are working very constructively with Cape York and with the Direct Instruction Initiative, and indeed the Cape York Peninsula, the Cape York Academy, which is administering the new federal program, has agreed to involve the Mardoo in that next phase of the program. And I do want to say that this really, this whole embrace of direct instruction and explicit instruction in these remote communities really very much is a bipartisan approach, and Noel Pearson will recognise it was the direct intervention of Jenny Macklin and Julia Gillard that ensured that this model was able to get up in those Cape York schools. So I think we've got to keep that bipartisan support going for this initiative. Now, when it comes to secondary school, it is the view of the board that we would be very much better looking, rather than sending children away to secondary boarding school in Perth, where many students do struggle. They struggle with homesickness, they struggle with keeping up with the general standard at those schools, and they suffer a social isolation. That the Mardoo are really very focused on establishing a residential, if we could call it a residential college, in one of the larger towns in the Pilbara. For example, we are looking particularly at Newman. Now, the idea there is that you would provide a college or a residential facility that would provide not only the accommodation but the pastoral support, and also additional instruction tuition for students who would then go off and attend the state government high school. Now, this seems to me to have very many benefits. It would ensure that we had the Aboriginal and the non-Aboriginal communities in the Pilbara, in those areas of the Pilbara, really interacting strongly at school and creating and forging the friendships that one does across the cultural divide. So we see that as a very strong positive, rather than taking a few of these kids out and putting them into boarding schools down in Perth, and indeed separating them from their communities. We also see that for many of these kids really, as I say, struggle with homesickness. The ability to go home on a weekend or a long weekend to your local community is going to be something that would be extremely beneficial. And they will be in an area where they are surrounded, where they are still connected with their friends and their families. So, to me, I think the model of just supporting private boarding schools, good that it is, and I accept, as the member for Solomon said, that there is a real need there, and in some places this will work. This will work very well. But I urge the government to be prepared to look at this other model, which certainly is going to be a much more beneficial model, I think, for Western Australia, where we have very small communities. I mean, the communities that I'm talking about, we've got 7 schools: the Poonmoo, Bengal, Coonawarrigi, Strelly, Warralong, Jigalong and Nullagine. So 7 communities, very, very, really quite. Jigalong and Nullagine are a little bigger, but the others very small schools. Now, we accept it is not appropriate for these, we cannot deliver effective secondary education in those communities, and the students will have to come to a larger centre. But we want that to be a centre within the Pilbara that gives these kids the sense to be with their family and their friends, but at the same time to have that opportunity to step up to higher academic standards, to be more supported, to be in a strong, supported environment, and giving them the opportunity to go out there and forge their way forward in an environment that will be much more nurturing for their culture. I just want to comment on some matters made by the member for Bowman. Look, I think it is about language instruction, and I think perhaps he's right in part that there has been a bit of overcorrection on this issue of the introduction of instruction in the local language. But I think the balance that I've seen best placed is that out in some of these schools like Hope Vale, where certainly the medium of instruction is English, and that is, I think parents in Aboriginal communities strongly support that. They want to make sure that their children have a very strong grasp of the English language, but that we shouldn't shy away from, at the same time, ensuring that there is also taught the written form of the language which they speak at home, or more generally in their community. In places that we're dealing with, in the Mardu lands, this is going to be very complicated because there are indeed so many different languages spoken in any one community that it is going to be somewhat difficult getting an agreed language and agreed orthography. But I do think it is important that the medium of instruction be English, but that we fully embrace introducing students to the written form of their first language. But so. I'm keen, I'm wanting to support the Indigenous Boarding Initiative, but I do urge the Minister to consider whether or not he would broaden that funding to take into account the sorts of facilities that the Mardu are keen to set up, because certainly in the Pilbara, and we don't have any non-government boarding schools, and we do want to do what we can to allow the children coming from these very small communities, tiny communities, to remain in the Pilbara, where we believe that they will prosper and achieve more educationally than being sent down to Perth.
I thank the honourable member for Perth. The question is that this bill be now read a second